Triangle. They are never heard from again.
But I remember, my daddy getting the telegram, and I think we were all really upset because we were looking forward to him coming home.
For 4 days, the Navy combs the ocean surface with ships and planes, searching for some sign of Donald Arsenault's Mariner or the 5 missing Avengers.
Then we heard on the news that it was probably the largest rescue mission since Amelia Earhart.
But the Navy finds nothing, not a life jacket or a raft, or even so much as a paper cup. It is assumed that something, perhaps a careless smoker on the gas-laden aircraft, caused the Mariner to explode. Why then was no wreckage found? Without finding debris of any kind, how could anyone know for sure? It was here in this empty patch of ocean, about 25 miles off the Florida coast, that the Gaines Mills reported finding the oil slick after witnessing the flash in the sky that night. They marked the coordinates, and that's where we began our search for the missing Mariner and her crew. Our expedition will be the first ever to look beneath the waves for clues of what happened to the Mariner.
You need to head southwest, Rick.
Our leader is David Bright.
That'll get us down to the first mark line.
A hard-nosed scientist who believes that what goes up must come down.
There were 2 big, beautiful Pratt & Whitney engines, and they would have sank like stones.
By dragging a side-scan sonar and a magnetometer over the bottom, 80 feet below, in a carefully calibrated search pattern around the Mariner's last coordinates, our team is confident of finding a long-lost piece of history.
If anything's there, we're going to find it. We've got the magnetometer running, measuring the Earth's magnetic field. Anything that's made of iron or steel, we'll pick up.
But if history is any guide, locating the Mariner will not be easy. Some estimate as many as 1,000 boats and planes have disappeared here without a trace, claiming as many as 8,000 victims along the way. Among them, the crew of the USS Cyclops in 1918.
Simply vanished without trace. 309 men gone. And no evidence that a lot of sailors turned up anywhere, that there had been a mutiny.
The freighter Marine Sulphur Queen in 1963, and the Sylvia Asa in 1976.
Whatever those ships encountered, it was just incredibly destructive and obliterated them without survivors.
In 1980, the freighter Poet, also gone without a trace.
520-foot ship carrying nothing more dangerous than number 2 yellow corn. Disappeared north of Bermuda, no EPIRB signal.
Some dismiss these disappearances as likely due to human error in an age before we had high-tech satellite equipment. But the fact is, vessels disappear in the Triangle with disturbing frequency, without warning, and without a trace.
Boats still disappear, probably 12 to 20 per year. 2000, 2001, 2 sister ships vanished in the Caribbean.
The U.S. Coast Guard in Miami is keenly aware of the perils of the vast open ocean that makes up the Bermuda Triangle. This one station alone is responsible for 20% of the nation's search and rescue missions.
The Coast Guard doesn't subscribe to the myth of the Bermuda Triangle. The ocean is an unforgiving environment. If you make a mistake, you will pay for it. And there's any number of factors that contribute to the losses of aircraft or vessel in this or any other part of the oceans.
But according to historians like Quizar, human error alone cannot explain all the Triangle's bizarre disappearances.
The area and the enigma is quite real. More ships and planes do vanish. They vanish for very unusual reasons in some cases.
In 1978, a small charter plane flying from Fort Lauderdale to Havana disappears from radar. In 1954, a special Navy flight carrying 44 passengers and crew to the Azores vanishes. The cargo manifest lists 111 life vests and 5 life rafts on board.
It's a luggage flight. There's no debris. That goes on frequently enough.
Even Charles Lindbergh reportedly has a close call in the Triangle. In 1928, 1 year after flying solo across the Atlantic, Lindbergh takes off for a night flight from Havana to St. Louis. According to published accounts of that flight, somewhere over the Florida Straits, Lindbergh's compass begins spinning. And by the time the sun comes up, he is way off course and headed out to sea. Down on the ocean surface, our expedition is getting its first taste of triangle treachery as well.
How close are we?
While trying to get our divers in position over a promising target, Captain Eric Smith sees something he's never seen in all his years at sea.
I'm steering by GPS. I have a regular magnetic compass and a fluxgate compass, and neither of them are cooperating. You ever had that happen before? No, I never have.
Could an erratic compass have been what happened to Flight 19 in 1945? To find out, we will send a Navy Avenger, one of only about a dozen still operable, to retrace Flight 19's path through the Bermuda Triangle.
We're all taught that from the very beginning to believe the instruments. The compass is a very reliable, very simple instrument.
Rick Siegfried is an experienced United Airlines pilot who flies around the globe in 747s. But he also flies this TBM Avenger for the Tri-State Warbird Museum in Ohio.
We're going to try to reenact the flight as best we can, not using modern navigation. We're going to use dead reckoning nav, just like they would have, back in that time. Make sure everything's secure. Stack is good and tight. Make sure there's no oil leaks coming from behind the engine.
Siegfried knows well the history and legend he is up against.
I definitely believe that there's something that's unexplainable at this time in that area.
William Kittinger actually witnessed one of the strangest triangle disappearing acts of all time. He was working in air traffic control in St. Thomas when a Navajo twin-engine plane approaching the airport simply vanished.
When he reported 2 miles out for landing, I asked him to show me his landing light, and I had visual contact when he showed me his light, and I turned my attention back to the departing aircraft and watched him depart. And when I turned back to clear the Navajo that land, I got no response, and his landing light was gone, and the target was missing off the radar.
Kittinger thought the plane had gone down in the shallow water just off the airport and immediately notified the Coast Guard.
There was nothing found. There was no aircraft, no reports of downed aircraft. It just disappeared.
Our team of scientists are convinced they will have better luck finding the missing mariner.
It's a potential target right here.
Hours of dragging sensors over the bottom has proven one thing. The bottom here looks like a moonscape. It's flat and hard. Anything man-made lying down here is going to stand out.
We're on target number 2 that they've identified, and we believe it's some kind of a piece that's sticking up. Maybe a wing edge, a plane, a piece of sheet metal from the plane or something like that.
For 60 years, the most confounding and compelling mystery of the Bermuda Triangle is the disappearance of Flight 19. 5 Navy Avengers fly off the coast of Florida on a routine training exercise and never return.
The oil tends to collect in the bottom cylinders, so we pull this through to make sure that there's not a hydraulic lock.
Pilot Rick Siegfried is getting ready to fly the path that Flight 19 planned to take that day. It's just one leg of our multi-pronged search for answers to what happened in December 1945.
We might get a little insight into how they might have either lost track of time and or lost track of their position.
Flying a World War II Navy Avenger, identical to the fated planes, Siegfried will navigate the course the same way the pilots did 60 years ago, using a compass, the sun, and landmarks.
Battery on. Oil good. Loose pump on.
Our plan is to take off from Fort Lauderdale, fly east 113 miles before turning northwest at Great Stirrup Key. After traveling 73 miles, we'll turn southwest off Great Sail Key and take the 120-mile journey back to Fort Lauderdale.
You ready for start?
The Naval Air Station where Flight 19 originated is now the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. And like the 5 planes that disappeared in 1945, we take off under mostly clear skies.
And what a glorious day, good visibility, scattered cloud deck up in front of us.
Following Flight 19's route, we head for Hens and Chicken Shoals.
The shoals should be just this side of the lighthouse and a little south.
We find the shoals. It's those rocks sticking out of the water.
We're looking at the shoals. I didn't see the shipwreck. It might be just a little further south.
But there's no sign of the old shipwreck where Flight 19 did its bombing runs. To stay on the same schedule, we fly around the shoals for about 15 minutes before continuing east.
And why don't we head for Little Syrup Key?
Down on the water, our experts have spent days systematically searching this patch of ocean for some scrap of the Martin Mariner that vanished while looking for Flight 19. This is where the Navy says the Mariner disappeared from its radar screens. This is where a passing tanker reported finding an oil slick.
Run!
All of our research and conjecture comes down to this: putting divers in the water. One of our vessels, the Sea Dog Diver, has found a target. It's big and it's metal, and it's 80 feet down. Could it be part of the Martin Mariner that disappeared 60 years ago, launching the legend of the Bermuda Triangle? Andrew Driver, a former member of the British Special Forces, is about to find out. Not knowing what awaits at the end of this line, Andrew begins a slow descent, fighting a strong current. At 40 feet, about halfway down, visibility is about 15 feet. Not ideal, but good enough to find a large chunk of airplane, if it's there. Suddenly, at 60 feet, the water temperature drops and visibility is cut in half. Andrew has hit a thermocline, a layer of cold water and thick plankton that will make finding the target that much more difficult. Andrew continues his descent, but doesn't realize he has arrived on the ocean floor until he hits it. Using a reel of line to measure his distance from the spot where the dive weights landed, Andrew begins swimming in ever-increasing circles until gradually a silhouette comes into view, something that looks man-made. Is this the wreckage we've been looking for? Or is it the muted remains of yet another disappearance from the Bermuda Triangle? Beneath this glistening water lies a graveyard littered with the skeletons of unnamed vessels. Their watery deaths remain a mystery. Locating remains of boats and planes known to be missing shouldn't be difficult with all the high-tech sonar equipment now available.
It's not such a big ocean anymore, considering what electronics can do.
But for unknown reasons, in the Triangle, evidence is rarely found.
It has to be something local to the area. It does not occur elsewhere to this extent.